Hello, I'm Dr. Joel Domingo with City University, and in this video I'm going to give you a cursory, and I repeat cursory, introduction to research methods, specifically in your dissertation. All right, let's begin. Found this graphic, and it's the control group and the out of control group, and for you dissertation and research nerds, I thought, this is pretty funny. So all right, okay, so in this video I'm going to review the concept of research approaches and methodologies. I'm going to explore the characteristics of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methodologies, and then understand what goes into chapter 3 of the dissertation. So here in residency 2, one of the things we were going to focus on, if you recall, in residency 1 was alignment and was about problem statement. Now here in residency 2, we're going to focus a little bit more on alignment, but also look a little bit in terms of methodology. We'll be talking specifically more about methodology in the session and in residency 3, but this video should hopefully give you a quick introduction to it. By now, hopefully you will have taken one or more of the quant or qual research courses, and so that you should have that foundation under your belt. If not, no worries. Just again, a quick caveat that this is just a cursory introduction and I won't go into specifics, but your chair, your committee, we have a lead methodologist, an institutional reviewer. We are all here to support you in your research journey. So let's talk about research philosophy. Now, these are these ology big words here. Research involves the following. Ontology. Ontology is the way we view things like ourselves. It involves epistemology and how we understand things like knowledge, and methodology, how we do things. And an important note here is that methodology is different from design. So make sure that's clear that methodology is a different concept than design, especially in a dissertation, because I often see students say, hey, I want to do phenomenology. Phenomenology is my methodology. No, qualitative methodology using phenomenological design. Now, Cresswell, which if many of you have taken the course, Introductory Research Methods, Cresswell uses the word approach for methodology. For simplification purposes, I'll just stick with the word methodology. And again, that's distinct from design. With methodologies, you could think of these on a spectrum rather than discrete singular choices. Many students say, I want to do either qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods, and it's either one or the other. Well, in reality, it's along a spectrum, and that there are different approaches or methodologies employed in every kind of study. Some tend to lean purely more quantitative, some tend to lean purely more qualitative, and mixed methods is right in the middle. Okay, now remember, designs are the way to handle that specific methodology of choice. So here in this graphic, the designs are given underneath. So on the left-hand side here, if you're employing a qualitative methodology, perhaps your research design is going to be phenomenological design. Maybe it's case study design or grounded theory design. Those are designs within qualitative methodology. Whereas on the right side, maybe you want to employ a quantitative methodology and use survey design, quasi-experimental, experimental. So again, using different methodologies and designs along the spectrum of research. Really important point. Let's start with quantitative approaches or quantitative methodologies. They're based on the assumption that reality is independent of its observers. This is more the philosophical part about quantitative methodology. What is important to examine is the connection between observable phenomena and causal relations. Logic and mathematics are the hallmark of this approach. The only results that are precise, not subjectives, are those that can be formulated in mathematical terms. It either it is or it is not. That's a quantitative approach, quantitative methodology. All quantitative methodologies or approaches need a hypothesis. A hypothesis includes a statement of possible factual patterns and or causal relations, whether they are confirmed or true or not. There's a thing called a null hypothesis. It's the prediction that no relationship between two variables is found, or no difference. So nothing happens. That's the null hypothesis. There's another thing called an alternative hypothesis, which means that you just reject the null hypothesis. So it goes back to math, using ones and zeros. Either it is not or it is. The alternative doesn't mean there's a different explanation. The alternative simply means the null is not true. It's either true or it's not. That's the philosophy behind quantitative methodology. Now, it's important within quantitative methodology to have directions and variables. So whenever you have a hypothesis, and again, you'll cover all this in the session, and your chair will work with you on these specific concepts if you're going to use a quantitative approach. But hypotheses have direction, non-direction, and variables. So let me give you a directional hypothesis that group A is better than group B in test A. Whereas a non-directional hypothesis is that group A is different than group B. So you notice directional means it's better, worse, etc. Whereas non-directional, it's different. Again, it either is or it isn't. You also have variables. You have what's known as a dependent and independent variable. So the dependent variable is what you wish to explain, whereas the independent variable is the variable that's expected to explain the change. Okay, independent and dependent variables. Very important concepts within quantitative methodology. Contrast that with qualitative approaches. In qualitative methodologies, they do not have a hypothesis. So if I see on a dissertation that a person is employing a qualitative methodology but using a paired samples t-test, well, I think something's wrong. It's misaligned. That's not the correct methodology designed to use within that dissertation. Okay. In qualitative approaches, research using qualitative data is always in the form of text and pictures. The words are the data. Qualitative approaches are more holistic, and the goal is to tell a richer story rather than just either it is or it isn't. Okay, it's used to answer the complex questions and nature of phenomena, often used with the purpose of describing and understanding things. Qualitative approaches build upon the researcher's ability to interpret and make sense of social phenomena. It's about telling a story, perhaps with a tentative answer. Sometimes it's used in combination with quantitative methods. It can be objective or subjectives, and it makes considerable use of inductive reasoning. So again, it's a different, it's not either it is or it isn't. Qualitative wants to get more into the texture of understanding things, of wanting to find out more about phenomena that's happening. So here's some examples of qualitative designs. And I've listed just 5 of them here, but there's many other qualitative designs that you can talk about with your chair. You could always talk to our lead methodologist over. Case study attempts to shed light on a phenomenon. The case can be an individual person, an event, group, or institution. The most important thing about case studies is that it is bounded, a bounded set. Ethnography focuses on the sociology of meaning through observation of phenomena. Typically, an ethnographer, a researcher, focuses on a community, whereas phenomenology is a study that attempts to understand people's perceptions, perspectives, etc. Grounded theory is a theory that's developed from this data. Content analysis is another form that looks at content, of material, of identifying patterns, themes, or biases. If you look closely, each of these are subsets of using words as your data. These are all qualitative methodologies, but designs within qualitative methodologies. Okay, that's the nuance here. So let me talk about mixed methods for a little bit. And mixed methods, a lot of people shy away from them because I think, wow, it's either one or the other. Well, no. Again, mixed methods can be appropriate. In fact, we've had many studies that are mixed methods here at CityU, and they're great. But it's the most challenging because you're doing, in essence, 2 studies that use both qualitative and quantitative methods. Okay. Challenges includes extensive data collection, the time it takes, so you need to consider the strategy if you're going to employ mixed methods. You got to think of the timing, whether you're going to do both of them at the same time or one before the other. Perhaps you have to think about which method is more important to you. You want to think about mixing it, is when you get your data, how are you going to talk about the data? Are you going to integrate that? Are you going to connect them? Or are you going to embed them within the narrative? The whole point for mixed methods is Again, it's a great methodology if your study warrants it. So remember alignment? Your methodology is built upon your purpose, which is built upon your problem, which flows out of your research topic. Okay, simple. Some mixed method strategies, a little bit more. We'll get into this more in Residency 3, but if you want to think about mixed methods, think about the strategy you want to use, whether you want to do them explanatory or exploratory. Now, if you have a tendency toward quantitative data, typically you'll want to explain something with a mixed methods approach. If you have a tendency toward qualitative data, maybe you want to explore more about your phenomenon. All right. So again, these are all different aspects of the three methodologies we offer here in CityU. Now, let me jump to what goes into Chapter 3, this methodology chapter. And if you remember, Chapter 1 is the intro, Chapter 2 is the literature review, Chapter 3 is your summary of what's been covered so far, first of all. It's a transition from the introduction and lit review to a discussion of the methods, and most importantly, it is a description of the methods with sufficient detail. The reason why you need to have sufficient detail is because any researcher in the future that wants to replicate your study will do so exactly as you did it, to a T. So you can think of Chapter 3 as your recipe for the research that you can replicate over and over again if someone were just to pick it up and attempt that. All right, so what is that detail? And I won't go over each box here, but just to highlight, the detail is going to talk about your participants, who are they? How do you get them? How do you sample them, etc.? The detail is going to be about the instruments that you choose. What type of instrument? Survey, tests, etc. What about the methods? The detail is going to be the use of a specific research method. Why? You have to justify why you use this and why it's important for your research problem. And then the design, going to the specific type of design. I shared in the previous slide 5 different designs of qualitative methodology. You have to justify it. Why? Why this specific one and why not the other one? What would have happened if you chose the other one? All this detail has to be explicitly stated. Then you're going to go into detail about analysis. How are you going to analyze the data once you get it? And then what are the boundary conditions that you choose to employ, whether you set them or they're set naturally? Those are known as limitations, delimitations. All these things occur in the methodology section, which is Chapter 3 of your dissertation. After all that is done, you've done Chapter 1, 2, and 3, which remember is called the proposal. You're going to go to a thing called IRB. And IRB is known as the Institutional Review Board. It's an ethics board. Sometimes it's called a human subjects board at other universities. We have one here at CityU. The purpose of the IRB essentially is faculty from all across the institution in all different spaces and different departments that come together to form a committee to look at, are you ensuring that any human subject is protected? They ensure that the research being done conforms to legal and ethical standards. It also protects you as a student. So if something goes awry, you are not at fault. The university, because of its protections, etc., they're the ones to take a look at. All right, all dissertations have to clear IRB before any data is collected. This is important. A student cannot collect data before clearing IRB because it is a violation of ethical standards. All doctoral students must complete the IRB training before submission to the IRB. And a quick hint, when you write your proposal, everything will be in future tense, especially in this Chapter 3. I will, or the researcher will solicit volunteers, or I will then contact the participants and interview them. Whereas a finished dissertation, you will say, I did. All right, so just a quick little nuance, and we'll talk about that later on in future residencies. But again, IRB is important. It's there to protect you and also protect the participants. So to sum up, start with the problem. Don't start with the methodology. Remember, if everything is aligned, you start with your topic and problem first. You don't start with your methodology first. You don't say, I want to do a phenomenology on X subject. Well, you don't know if X subject warrants that. That's alignment. Make sure your methodology addresses the research questions. Again, alignment, so use the prospectus tool. You want to have a good research text, whether that's Cresswell, Patton, etc. Have something that grounds you in the basics of research, and not just have one, have 2 or 3. Remember, Chapter 3 is the recipe that can be replicated by others. That's why Chapter 3 is one of the most difficult parts of a dissertation, because there's so much detail in there and it has to be right. The precision of how you write in Chapter 3 is critical. All right, well, that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to being with you on your dissertation journey. Thank you.